So, Craig,
yeah,
you very smartly point out that their core guys are signed on.
Everybody.
When you look at this, they're not really signed on long term.
Nope.
Is the 49ers Super Bowl window closing?
Well, let's go to the official Carton Show Super Bowl window.
We have a Super Bowl window.
That's right. So the window opens and the window closes. So they would say working window, and there's a peeping Tom in there as well.
Creepy neighbor.
All right, so here's the deal. Now, the reality is that all the stars other than Chase Young, he's not going to be a Niner next year. You can book that based on his performance late and the amount of money he's going to ask for. San Francisco has one major benefit for the next year, maybe two, and that is they have found a franchise quarterback. We all agreed yesterday he's a top 10 quarterback now in the NFL, and he doesn't get paid any money. So they've got this window, which is now wide open.
Wide open.
Because they're not spending $20, $30, $40 million a year on their quarterback. And that's what John Lynch is kind of alluding to. We have to be smart, recognizing that down the road, we've got some big contracts we're going to have to hand out. It actually plays to Chicago, which I'll explain later in the show about what the Bears are going to do with Justin Fields. So right now, the San Francisco window is wide open.
Wide open.
It is not closed at all. A, because they're in the NFC, and B, because you're getting top quality quarterback play out of a guy that is not being paid top quality quarterback money. Their big decisions are really a year from now. What do you do with Aiyuk? Do you franchise him? Do you give him a long-term deal? And all those other contracts that expire in 2025, how many of those guys go into that last year lame duck? How many of those guys get restructured? How many guys get extended? And are we doing that off a Super Bowl win? So unlike a lot of teams who make that run and then immediately the window's closing and closing and closing, it's kind of a unique situation where San Francisco has made a couple runs, obviously without getting the trophy, but the window wide open.
It's closing. You know, while I sit here and listen to John Lynch talking about, we're not going to be reckless, but they're planning. When he says the word planning, he's referring to Brock Purdy.
Yes.
Because he's going to be the guy that's going to be north of 40, 45 million.
And Plax, remember this. Because he wasn't a first-round draft pick, there is no fifth-year option.
Right.
Defense was that hiccup this year. So whoever, if it's not going to be Steve Wilkes, whoever the new guy is, you got to save some room for that guy to operate with his
but as far as the shutdown corner, there aren't many, shutdown corners in this league that are going to be available. And we didn't even get the opportunity to speak about Greenlaw and what happened to him. I felt really, terrible for him in that situation. But, is he going to be back healthy when the season starts?
I doubt it's when the season starts.
I mean, if he goes to Aaron Rodgers' surgeon, then he'll be back on the field come September. I'm being serious. But Chase Young won't be there. But just like Willie said, man, they have to find a way to shore up that defense in the secondary if they want to.
And remember this, if you want to sign a guy, sometimes we overstate, how stringent the cap is. You can always make it work. You can restructure contracts. You give guys big signing bonuses, guaranteed money up front. So if there's a guy out there, as you take a look at kind of, the name skill position guys from a standpoint of what the cap hit is versus, when they become free agents, they're still good for another year. Right. And because Brock Purdy ain't making any money and you have him under contract for a couple more years before you really got to pay him, and there is no fifth-year option, that window is wide open. And while we're talking about windows, I want to be very fair. Normally when you win a Super Bowl, the window starts closing immediately, whether it's age or, guys retiring or guys looking like Chris Jones will to go get a lot of money maybe elsewhere. Because it's Mahomes and he's only 28, Kansas City's window wide open as well.
I agree.
And that's not the norm. Normally, you win one, and then you may not get back there for a while. Their window stays wide open.
Yeah, but on top of like what we talked about, Andy Reid ain't going nowhere, right? So when you have Andy Reid, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Kelsey, who hasn't talked about retirement either. I mean, the whole band is.
Well, ain't nobody retiring when you can go for something that's never been done before.
Exactly.
I really think if they had lost, and I'm making this up, I don't know, but I think it's much more likely that if a guy like Reid or Kelsey were considering retirement, you do it off the loss. You don't do it when you now have a chance to do something that's never been done.
Yeah, that's the reason why John Lynch says that's why the draft is so important.
Yep.
Maybe you can find a Purdy. It's not, it doesn't happen often, but maybe you can get some of those young guys on rookie contracts to come in and compete without paying them a lot of money.
Yeah, look, San Francisco, I could almost write them in right now. They're going to win the NFC West. Like that's done.
Yeah.
Like that's a lock, that's a wrap. So that's why that window is wide open. Go ahead, Jacob.
Is it too early to start comparing Mahomes and Brady?
No, it's not too early, but as I said about a half hour ago, it's disrespectful to Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw because everyone forgets that they've won 4, right? So the rarefied air that Mahomes is entering is getting to 4 because only 3 guys have won more than him, right? Tom Brady's got 7, 6 with New England, 1 with Tampa. You've got Terry Bradshaw's got 4, all with your Pittsburgh Steelers, and Joe Montana's got 4, obviously, with the Niners. So, yes, big picture, I think the goal should be 8, so you've got more than Brady, and then you can announce yourself as the greatest of all time, and nobody would argue it because you have more Super Bowls than anybody else, right? But how about showing a little respect to the 2 guys that stand in between you and Tom Brady? Like, you can't pretend that Bradshaw, who I know only played in the 70s, it counts. Or Joe Montana, 80s and 90s, it counts. Those 2 men are second place all time in Super Bowl wins. So I'm trying to figure out why we're so quick to compare Mahomes to Brady and his 7 titles and not give any homage at all to the 2 guys that have 4 because they exist.
I mean, with all due respect, when you mention Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw, when you say Terry Bradshaw, before Super Bowls doesn't jump off the page because of it was the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Because the defense.
He's still Curtin.
Defense and John Stallworth and
Lynn Swan,
sure. And all those guys. But when we start comparing Mahomes to Brady, we're talking about in which the rate he has acquired these 3 world championships, being 28 years old, and Tom Brady played till he was 46. So if you put all those numbers together, we're looking at, you know what, he may be capable of winning another, 3 or 4 more Super Bowls in the next, 15 years.
I think he's certainly capable of doing it, barring some kind of catastrophic injury.
In comparison.
But we do it, and I try to digest, what people are talking about, so I don't miss out on anything. And I haven't heard a single person on TV or radio talk about the fact that you're omitting 2 guys that won 4 Super Bowls. It makes no sense to me. Yeah. Like, why are we talking about Brady when he hasn't done better than Bradshaw or Montana?
Yeah, you talk about Bradshaw being slighted. Like, if I'm Joe Burrow, if I'm Lamar Jackson, if I'm all these guys, I feel slighted. Because you're telling me right now, you got the rights to get from the league. Like, we don't matter. Like, if we don't have an opportunity next year to kind of get right and get to the Super Bowl as well. So, obviously, he's looking at the situation where he goes, 7 is the magic number. But if I'm Josh Allen, those guys, this is bulletin board material.
Except for this.
He beat those guys. I get that.
Well, not only
did
he beat them, and most likely continue to beat them, those guys, only Joe Burrow has beaten them, right? Josh Allen hasn't. Lamar Jackson obviously is not. Those guys can't be sensitive and complain about being left out of the conversation. They've never done it.
But one thing that is important to point out, so can you go back to that graphic, right? You're like, Mahomes is on pace to beat Brady. Mahomes on pace to beat Brady. One thing people forget is Brady went on a Super Bowl winless streak for quite some time after this. There was 10 years between that 3rd Super Bowl win and his 4th, which is something to really consider because it's not promised. I think people do bypass Bradshaw and they bypass Montana because we assume Mahomes is going to keep winning at this pace. Because the greatest of all time, Tom Brady, took a 10-year gap between his Super Bowls.
The only person alive was Craig at that time. Like, we were all young. We didn't watch Brady. I'm sorry. Did I throw
That's okay. It's not lies.
I didn't mean
I happen to have been alive when Bradshaw won 04.
Right.
Yeah. When a guy named Rocky Blyer played with 9 toes. I remember.
Yeah, we were all a twinkle in our father's eye while you was sitting on the couch.
And the other thing is, football is not baseball. It's not basketball, where you could talk about streaks and talk about what you've done over a period of time and try to now use that period of time to predict what you're going to do in the same amount of time or games or appearances. Like, baseball lends itself to that, right? Basketball lends itself to that. Football doesn't. And you can't ever forget, and this will be the most cliche thing I hope I say today, it's still a very violent sport. It is. So every time he drops back to throw the ball, there's always that chance of, not that anyone roots for it, of course, but that's on the table. So let's just slow our roll about the dude winning 7 or 8, and let's worry about him catching Bradshaw and Montana and getting past them before we're like, if I'm Tom Brady and I'm King Kong and I'm on the top of the mountain, I ain't worried about Patrick Mahomes one little bit. Because there's 2 other dudes you got to pass before you can even think about getting to what I accomplished.
So you mean to tell me that after Tom Brady won his first 3 Super Bowls, he wasn't looking at Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw as being in the barometer?
But he didn't match it for 11 years.
Yes.
That doesn't matter.
No.
He didn't match it for 11 years.
Looking to do it, though.
Yeah, but he was.
Thank
And
you
he
for
failed
saying
10
that.
times.
He was looking at the guys who had won more than him. He had 3. Those guys had 4. So what I'm saying is Mahomes and Mahomes sycophants out there should be doing the same thing. Brady's not the goal right now. You got to win as many as Bradshaw and Montana. And then you have to win more than those 2 guys.
Yeah.
And by the way, and play this out. If and when he ties Bradshaw and Montana with 4, all right, now you got to win another one. Now you got to win another one to be ahead of those guys.
Yep.
And when you get to that place, you still got to win 3 more Super Bowls to be better than Brady.
Hey, it can
so
be
let's
done.
relax.
So you say that's never going to happen?
It can
never happen.
When Tom Brady has won all these championships, everybody on this panel right here can sit here and say that will never be done again. And now we're watching the young man who was on the brink of doing.
He ain't even close.
What you mean he's not close?
He's 4 away from tying and 5 away from surpassing it. I'll give you an example.
The man is 28 years old, man.
I'll give you a really bad NBA example. There's a lot of people think that Will Chamberlain, athletically and as just pure talent, was a far better basketball player than Bill Russell. But any list that anyone's ever created, Bill Russell's ahead of Will Chamberlain. Why is that? Because he's got
13 championships.
Thank you. 8 straight. Okay. So beyond that, it's the same argument that I'm going to make for Tom Brady. Patrick Mahomes, great quarterback, will never be thought of as the GOAT until you got 8. You got to get to 8. And I can tell you right now, that's almost impossible.
So were the teams better in Boston with Bill Russell than they were with Chamberlain?
Say it again, I apologize.
Were the teams better in Boston?
He certainly had much more Hall of Fame talent around him than Wilt ever did. But you get my point.
Starting 5.
I said it was a bad basketball analogy. But you understand where I'm going with it. You understand where I'm going with it, right? Anyhow, just remember this. The window is open in Kansas City. It's closed in New York. It's open in San Francisco.
For both teams.
It's closed in Cleveland. It's open in Baltimore. It's closed in Buffalo. It's open in LA.
It's not closed in Buffalo?
For the Chargers.
It's
closed in Carolina. And New Orleans and Indianapolis.
Keep it closed. Keep it closed.
There you go.
And
Tampa.
Open it for Buffalo.
I'll tell you what, Buffalo, here's Buffalo.
Crack. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. Get a little breeze. Pittsburgh.
Hey there, thank you so much for watching The Carton Show. You can subscribe right here to get all the latest bits and segments from the show. And by the way, while you're at it, we have a lot of great shows on FS1, so check them out too.